The auction barn smelled of dust, sweat, and old wood soaked by years of hard days. Boots scraped the floor as people moved from pen to pen, judging muscle and bone with quick eyes. Voices rose and fell in short bursts, numbers called out, then swallowed by the noise. Horses shifted under the lights, some proud, some nervous, some already knowing their worth. At the far end of the line stood one horse no one wanted to look at for long. He was thin, ribs showing like lines drawn too close together. His head hung low, and one front leg trembled when he tried to shift his weight. The tag on the gate might as well have been a warning sign. Weak horse. Bad buy. Trouble waiting to happen. Buyers passed him without slowing, their attention pulled to younger stock with bright eyes and strong backs. A few glanced his way, shook their heads, and moved on. The horse stood still through it all, ears flicking at sounds he could not escape. He had learned not to hope. Hope had been sold out of him 1 mile at a time. Each cough in his chest reminded him why he was here, why the long road had ended under these lights. He lowered his head and waited for the end of the day. Near the back of the crowd stood a boy holding on to the sleeve of an older man. The boy did not see the horses the way others did. His world was built of sound and touch, of air moving when a body passed, of the way a voice changed when someone lied or grew kind. The auction was loud to him, sharp and confusing, but he listened carefully, sorting it out piece by piece. He heard hoofs scrape. He heard a horse breathe too hard. He heard something else too, a sound that did not fit. It was a quiet shuffle, uneven, patient. When the boy turned his head toward it, his hand tightened on the man's sleeve. "That one," the boy said softly. The man frowned, following the direction of the boy's face. He saw only the weak horse at the end of the line. "The one nobody wanted, not that one," the man replied. His voice was gentle but firm. "That horse will not last. We are just here to watch." But the boy had already let go. He moved forward slowly, cane tapping the floor, counting steps. People stepped aside without thinking much of it. A blind child at an auction did not draw bids or trouble. When he reached the gate, he stopped. He did not reach through the bars. He simply stood close and listened. The horse lifted his head. He did not know why he did it. Something about the quiet felt different. The boy's breathing was steady. There was no hunger in it, no judgment. The horse took a step closer, and the boy smiled, just a little. "You are tired," the boy whispered. The horse blew out a slow breath. The auctioneer's voice cracked through the barn, calling the next lot. Bidding moved fast, then slowed. When the weak horse was led into the ring, the sound changed. Chairs creaked. Someone coughed. No one raised a hand. The opening price was low. Silence answered. The man found the boy's shoulder and leaned down. "No one is bidding," he said. "That means something." "It means he is still here," the boy replied. A laugh rose from somewhere in the crowd, not cruel, just tired. Someone muttered that the horse was only good for one thing, and even that was a stretch. The auctioneer tried again, lowering the price further. Still nothing. The boy lifted his hand. At first, no one noticed. The auctioneer's eyes skimmed past him. The man beside the boy stiffened. "You cannot," he whispered urgently. "You do not even see him." "I hear him," the boy said. The auctioneer finally caught the movement. He squinted, confused. "Are you bidding, son?" "Yes," the boy answered, voice steady. A murmur spread through the barn. Heads turned. The man stepped forward. "I am with him," he said. But the words felt thin even to his own ears. The price was called. It was so low it felt like a mistake. The gavel hovered. No one else spoke. The sound of it coming down echoed louder than it should have. "Sold." The word landed heavy. The weak horse flinched at the noise. The boy exhaled, a long breath he had been holding without knowing it. People shook their heads as they filed out. Some felt pity, others felt relief it was not their problem. A few felt something closer to shame, but did not stay with it long. The barn emptied, leaving behind the dust and the echo of hooves that would soon be gone. Paperwork took time. The boy waited by the gate, fingers resting lightly on the wood. The horse stood close now, close enough that the boy could feel the warmth of him. He reached out slowly, careful not to startle. His hand found a rough mane, thin but real. The horse did not pull away. "You are safe," the boy said, not as a promise but as a hope spoken out loud. Outside, the day had shifted. Wind moved across the open ground, carrying the smell of earth and distant rain. The man loaded the horse with help from a handler who did not bother to hide his doubts. He shook his head once, quietly. "That horse will break your heart," he said. "Maybe," the man replied. He looked at the boy, who stood with one hand resting on the trailer, listening to the horse inside. "Or maybe he will change it." The ride away from the auction was long. The road hummed beneath the wheels. The horse shifted with every bump, fighting pain and fear. The boy sat close, one hand pressed against the side of the trailer wall, feeling each movement. When the horse stumbled, the boy felt it like a pulled thread in his chest. They reached home as the light faded. The place was small, worn, honest, a simple barn, a patch of ground that had seen better seasons. The man hesitated before opening the trailer, bracing himself for what might come next. The horse stepped down slowly, legs shaking. He stood, breathing hard, then swayed. The boy reached for him at the same moment the man did. Between them, the horse steadied. That night, the sounds were new to all of them. The horse stood in his stall, listening to wind pass through cracks in the boards. The boy lay awake, counting breaths, his mind filled with questions he could not see answers to yet. The man sat at the table long after dark, staring at the cost of feed and care written on a scrap of paper. Somewhere in the quiet, the horse coughed, a deep sound that did not fade quickly. The boy turned his head toward it, heart racing. He knew that sound. It was not a small thing. Outside, clouds gathered, hiding the stars. Inside the barn, the weak horse shifted his weight and waited, and the boy listened, already sensing that what he had bought at auction was not just a horse, but a choice that would test them all in ways none of them could yet understand. Morning came slowly, the kind that does not rush to show itself. Light slipped through the cracks in the barn boards, thin and pale, laying quiet lines across the floor. The horse had not slept much. His breathing stayed rough through the night, rising and falling like it was climbing a hill it never quite reached the top of. Every time he shifted his weight, the wood creaked beneath him, and each sound pulled the boy closer to waking. The boy rose before the house stirred. He knew the way by memory, each step counted, each turn known by heart. The air in the barn felt colder than outside, heavy with the smell of hay and old timber. He stopped at the stall door and listened. The horse was standing, but only just. There was a pause between breaths that made the boy's chest tighten. "I am here," the boy said softly. The horse lifted his head. He did not know the words, but he knew the sound. It was steady. It did not ask for anything. He shifted closer to the door, drawn by something he could not explain. The boy reached through the bars and rested his hand on the horse's neck. The skin was warm, too warm. The horse flinched at first, then relaxed when the touch stayed gentle. The boy traced the line of bone beneath thin muscle, reading the horse the way others read books. "You have been carrying this a long time," he whispered. Behind them, the man watched from the doorway. He had slept little, too. Worry sat heavy on him, louder than the quiet of the morning. He had seen sick horses before. He knew what thin hope looked like. Still, watching the boy and the horse together stirred something he could not reason away. They worked slowly that morning, water first, offered in small amounts. The horse drank, then stopped, chest heaving. Feed was set aside untouched. The man frowned but said nothing. He had learned that forcing things only made them worse. Later, a neighbor came by, drawn by word that traveled faster than expected. He leaned on the fence, arms crossed, eyes narrowing as he looked at the horse. "That one came from the auction," he said. Folks were talking. The man nodded. "They said he was no good," the neighbor snorted. "Auctions are full of horses like that. Most do not make it long after." The boy stood quietly nearby, listening, his fingers curled around the fence rail. "How long is not long?" he asked. The neighbor hesitated. "Long enough to grow attached," he said, then walked away. The words stayed behind like dust that would not settle. By midday, the horse's cough worsened. Each one seemed to pull something loose deep in his chest. The man made a decision he had been circling since dawn. He hitched the truck and made the call. The wait felt endless. While they waited, the boy stayed with the horse. He brushed him slowly, careful around the sore leg. Each stroke was unhurried. The horse's ears flicked back and forth, listening not just to the brush but to the steady presence beside him. He had known hands that rushed, hands that demanded. This was neither. The vet arrived in the late afternoon. Her voice was calm, practiced. She moved with quiet confidence, listening to lungs, checking eyes, lifting the trembling leg. The horse tolerated it, though his strength faded quickly. The boy stood back, hands folded, hearing every change in tone, every pause that meant more than words. The vet stepped aside with the man. Her voice dropped. "He is in rough shape," she said. "Long road ahead if he even makes it. There is infection, old injury, and weakness from poor care. It will take time and money, and there are no guarantees." The man nodded. He had expected nothing less. The boy waited until the footsteps returned. He did not ask the question out loud. He did not need to. The answer was already sitting heavy in the air. That night, rain came. It drummed softly on the roof, a sound that usually brought comfort. The horse stood through it, head low, breathing uneven. The boy lay awake again, counting the seconds between coughs. Each one felt longer than the last. In the days that followed, routine settled in, fragile but steady, medicine at set hours. Small walks when the horse could manage them, rest when he could not. The boy learned every sound the horse made, every shift of weight that meant pain or relief. He could tell when the horse was tired before anyone else noticed. The man watched it all with a mix of pride and fear. He worried what would happen if the horse did not recover. He worried what that would do to the boy, who had already tied his heart to a creature others had written off. Visitors came and went. Some offered advice. Some offered doubt. One man suggested quietly that maybe it would be kinder to let go early. The boy heard that too. He did not respond. He only reached for the horse's mane and held on. At night, the boy began talking to the horse. Not stories exactly, but pieces of himself. How he learned to listen harder when the world went dark. How he trusted sounds and feelings when sight was taken away. The horse stood and listened, head turned toward the voice, breathing a little easier when it was near. There were small signs that kept hope alive. One morning, the horse finished his water and nudged the empty bucket with his nose. Another day, he took a few mouthfuls of feed on his own. Each moment felt like a fragile gift, easily taken back. But there were setbacks too. A night when the cough returned with force. A morning when the horse would not put weight on his leg. The man paced the barn, hands clenched, waiting for light, waiting for answers that did not come. The boy felt the change before anyone spoke it. Something in the horse was fighting, but something else was holding on to pain too tightly. It was like listening to two rhythms that refused to match. One evening, as the sun dipped low, the horse suddenly pulled away from the fence, startled by a sound only he could hear. His legs buckled and he nearly went down. The man caught him just in time. The boy froze, heart pounding, every sense screaming danger. The horse recovered, barely, but the moment left a mark on all of them. The man looked at the boy, eyes heavy. "We have to be ready for anything," he said. The boy nodded, though his throat felt tight. He pressed his hand against the horse's side and listened to the uneven beat beneath. "I know," he said. "But he is not done yet." Outside the barn, the sky darkened again. The wind carried the smell of rain and something else, something uncertain. The weak horse stood between pain and hope. The boy stood between faith and fear. And the man stood between hard choices that were drawing closer with every passing day. None of them knew what the next morning would bring. Only that the bond forming in that quiet barn was growing stronger, even as the future pressed in, waiting to test it. The days stretched into a slow test of patience, each one measured not by hours but by breaths and steps. The horse learned the shape of the small pasture, memorizing it the way the boy memorized rooms. He walked only when he had to, careful with the injured leg, moving like someone crossing thin ice. Every step mattered. The boy counted them in his head, listening for the scrape that meant pain and the softer sound that meant relief. The man kept records now. Times, doses, small changes written in a careful hand. He did it late at night when the house was quiet. Numbers filled the pages, but behind them were questions he could not write down. How long could they keep this up? What would it cost the boy if the horse failed? What would it cost them all if he succeeded? The vet returned more than once. Each visit brought hope and caution tangled together. The infection was stubborn, the injury older than first thought. The horse had been worked too long, fed too little, pushed until his body learned to survive by shrinking inward. Recovery would mean more than medicine. It would mean undoing years of damage, and that was never simple. Word traveled. People from nearby farms stopped by under the excuse of neighborly concern. Some brought feed or advice, others brought quiet judgment. They stood by the fence, watching the weak horse move under the boy's voice, shaking their heads when they thought no one noticed. One woman stayed longer than the rest. She had raised horses her whole life. She did not speak at first. She only watched as the boy brushed the horse, moving slowly, stopping when the horse tensed, continuing when he relaxed. After a while, she spoke to the man. "That boy is teaching that horse how to trust again," she said. "That part matters more than you think." The man nodded, though the weight on his chest did not lift. At night the horse dreamed. His legs twitched, breath quickening as if running from something unseen. The boy learned to hear the difference between rest and fear. When fear came, he sat by the stall, hand resting on warm skin, speaking softly until the horse's breathing slowed. Sometimes the horse leaned into the touch, surprising them both. He had never leaned on anyone before. It felt dangerous to rely on something that might disappear. But the boy did not pull away. He stayed, steady as the ground beneath them. The conflict was not only in the barn. The man felt it every time he went to town. Supplies cost more than expected. Work was harder to come by. People asked questions that sounded harmless but carried sharp edges. Why spend so much on a horse that might never work? Why let a blind boy shoulder such disappointment? He had no clean answers, only the truth that some choices were not about winning. One afternoon, the horse refused to move. He stood planted, head low, breath shallow. The boy sensed it instantly. "Something is wrong," he said. The vet came again. Tests were done, hands pressed along ribs and legs. The verdict was unclear. Pain flared without warning, then retreated, leaving weakness behind. The horse was fighting something deeper than infection now, something that did not show itself easily. That night, the man sat alone in the barn long after the boy had gone inside. He watched the horse stand in the dim light, sides moving with effort. He wondered if love was enough. He wondered if stubborn hope could turn into harm. The horse shifted and nearly stumbled. The man was on his feet instantly, steadying him. The horse did not resist. He leaned, trusting hands he had once feared. The moment cut deep. It felt like a promise neither of them had the right to make. The boy sensed the tension even when no one spoke of it. He heard it in the man's silence, in the way visitors stopped coming, in the way the horse's steps grew fewer. One evening he asked the question they had all been avoiding. "Are we keeping him alive for us or for him?" The man did not answer right away. When he did, his voice was rough. "I do not know," he said. "That is what scares me." The boy nodded. He pressed his forehead against the horse's shoulder. The horse stood still, accepting the closeness. He had learned that this touch did not demand anything in return. Days later, a storm rolled in fast. Thunder cracked overhead, close enough to shake the barn. The horse panicked, memories rising with the noise. He reared slightly, then came down hard on the injured leg. The sound that followed was wrong, sharp, final sounding. The man and boy rushed in together. The horse stood trembling, weight shifted, breathing wild. The pain was clear now, undeniable. The vet arrived through rain and mud, urgency in every movement. There was damage, not new, but made worse. The injury had been hiding, waiting for the wrong moment. Now it was awake. The words spoken that night were careful and heavy. Rest might help, time might help, but there were limits. The horse would never be what others wanted him to be. He might never be fully sound. The question hung in the air after the vet left. It was the same one, louder now. The boy stayed with the horse through the storm, counting breaths, whispering calm. The horse stood through the pain, refusing to lie down. He had learned long ago that getting back up was not always possible. The man watched them and felt torn in two. One path led toward mercy through letting go. The other led toward uncertainty and sacrifice. Neither felt clean. In the days that followed, the horse surprised them. He began to put weight back on the leg, slowly, carefully. The pain remained, but it no longer ruled every movement. The vet cautioned against false hope, but even she admitted the horse was not done fighting. The boy sensed a shift. The horse's breathing changed when he spoke. His ears turned faster. His body responded to trust in ways medicine could not measure. Still, the conflict remained. Progress was fragile. One wrong step could undo it all. The man balanced every decision on a narrow edge, knowing that love did not remove responsibility. One evening, as the sun set low and quiet, the boy led the horse a few steps farther than usual. The horse hesitated, then followed. Each step was slow, deliberate, chosen. They stopped together, listening to the world settle. The boy smiled, small and tired. "We are still here," he said. The horse stood beside him, breathing warm air into the cooling dusk. He was still weak, still uncertain. But he was standing. And somewhere between fear and hope, the real test was drawing closer, waiting to see which one would finally win. The change came quietly at first, the kind that could be missed if no one was listening closely. The horse began waking before dawn, shifting in his stall with a restlessness that felt different from pain. His breathing still rasped, but there was purpose in it now, as if he was gathering himself for something he could not yet name. The boy noticed before anyone else. He always did. "You are thinking again," the boy whispered one morning, hand resting against the stall door. The horse turned his head toward the sound. His ears stayed forward longer than usual. The man watched from a distance, coffee cooling in his hands. He had learned not to interrupt these moments. Whatever passed between the boy and the horse did not belong to anyone else. Still, tension pulled tight in his chest. Change could mean progress, but it could also mean collapse. With a horse this weak, the line between the two was thin. The vet's warnings echoed in his mind. Good days can trick you. One step forward does not erase what came before. The injury was still there. The sickness still lingered, waiting for a chance to rise again. The pasture had been closed for days, the ground too soft, the risk too high. But that morning, the horse stood at the gate, nose pressed to the wood, breathing in the air beyond. He pawed once, gently, then waited. The boy heard it and smiled without meaning to. "He wants out," the boy said. The man hesitated. He checked the sky, the ground, the horse's stance. Everything in him said wait, but something else said trust what you see. He opened the gate just enough to lead the horse a few steps onto firmer ground. The horse moved like he always did now, slow and careful. Each step landed with intention. The boy walked beside him, cane tapping softly, counting under his breath. The man followed close, ready to catch weight if it shifted wrong. They did not go far. Just enough for the horse to feel the sun on his back and the open space around him. He stood there, breathing deep, muscles tight with effort. Then he did something none of them expected. He lifted his head and let out a low sound, not a whinny, not quite a call, but something close to relief. The boy laughed, surprised by the sound coming from his own chest. The man felt his eyes burn. Moments like this were dangerous. They made you believe. That belief carried them through the next days, but not without cost. The horse tired faster after being outside. His cough returned at night, sharper than before. The vet adjusted medicine, caution heavy in her voice. The body was being asked to do too much, too soon. Pressure came from the outside as well. Bills stacked up. Work slipped through the man's fingers as he stayed close to home. Neighbors stopped suggesting and started warning. One evening, a man leaned over the fence and spoke plainly. "You're dragging this out," he said. "For the boy, sure, but at what price?" The boy heard every word. He said nothing, but that night he stayed awake longer than usual. He listened to the horse shift, heard the strain in each breath. Doubt crept in, quiet but sharp. The next morning, the horse would not eat. He stood with his head low, eyes dull. Panic rose fast. The vet was called again, urgency tightening every movement. The exam was long and tense. When it ended, the answers were still not clear. "He is walking a narrow path," the vet said. Any stress could push him the wrong way. The man nodded, jaw clenched. Stress had become unavoidable. The boy reached for the horse's neck, fingers trembling. "I do not want to hurt you," he whispered. The horse shifted closer, pressing lightly into the touch. It was not the movement of an animal ready to give up. It was the movement of one holding on. Days blurred together again, this time with an edge that cut deeper. Every sound felt louder. Every step was watched. The man slept in short stretches, listening for trouble. The boy stopped asking questions and started listening harder than ever. Then came the invitation that changed everything. A local charity held a small gathering each year, bringing people together for food, stories, and a simple horse demonstration. Someone suggested the boy and the horse come just to be seen. Not to perform, just to stand, the idea settled heavy. It was risk layered on hope. The vet warned against it. The neighbors warned louder, but the boy felt something shift inside him. He needs to know the world again, the boy said. And I think I do too. The man wrestled with the decision for nights. He imagined the horse faltering in front of strangers. He imagined the boy hearing whispers of failure. He imagined not going at all and wondering forever what might have been. The morning of the gathering arrived under a low gray sky. The horse stood quiet as he was brushed, as tack was adjusted lightly, carefully. The boy moved with practiced calm, hiding fear behind focus. The trailer ride was tense. Every bump felt like a test. The man watched the horse constantly through the small window, heart pounding. When they arrived, the sounds hit first. Voices, laughter, children running. The horse tensed, muscles tight. The boy felt it immediately. Easy, he murmured. I am here. They led the horse into a quiet corner away from the noise. People noticed them anyway. Eyes followed the thin horse and the blind boy walking beside him. Whispers moved through the crowd. Some saw weakness. Some saw courage. Some saw a mistake waiting to happen. The horse stood, breathing hard. The boy stood close, one hand on the lead rope, the other resting against warm skin. The man hovered nearby, ready to step in. Then the unexpected happened. A child's laugh rang out, high and clear. The horse startled, stepping sideways. Pain flared. The injured leg buckled. Time slowed. The man moved. The boy froze, heart slamming. The horse struggled to stay upright, muscles screaming. Hands reached out from the crowd, then stopped, unsure. The moment balanced on a knife edge, fall or stand. Collapse or fight. The horse gathered himself, breath tearing from his chest. He planted his good leg, then carefully set the injured one down. He stood, shaking but upright. The crowd fell silent. The boy exhaled a breath he did not know he was holding. He pressed his forehead against the horse's neck, grounding both of them. You did it, he whispered. But the effort had taken everything. The horse sagged moments later, exhaustion washing over him. The man caught the lead, guiding him back toward the trailer. The crowd parted quietly now, something changed in the air. They made it home just before nightfall. The horse was barely holding himself together. The vet was called again, urgency sharper than ever. This time, the conversation was heavier. The body had been pushed to its limit. Recovery would demand a decision that could no longer wait. The boy sat in the barn long after the vet left, listening to the horse breathe. Each breath felt like a question. The man stood in the doorway, knowing that the next choice they made would shape everything that came after. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the boards. Inside, the weak horse stood between strength and surrender, the blind boy stood between love and fear, and the moment they had all been moving toward finally closed in, ready to reveal whether hope would hold or break under the weight of what came next. The barn felt smaller that night, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. The horse stood with his head low, breathing shallow but steady. Each rise of his chest felt like a question being asked again and again. The boy sat on a small stool beside the stall, hands folded, ears tuned to every sound. The man stood back, giving them space, though his heart was pressed tight with worry. The vet returned before sunrise. Her steps were quiet, her voice softer than usual. She checked the horse again, slowly, carefully, as if each touch mattered more than the last. When she finished, she stepped away and sighed. He is exhausted, she said, but he is not done. Not yet. The words landed gently, not as a promise, but not as an ending either. She explained what the coming weeks would need: strict rest, careful movement, time that could not be rushed. The injury would never fully disappear, but it could heal enough to live without pain. enough to stand strong in his own way. The man felt something loosen in his chest. Not relief exactly, but direction. The boy heard it in the shift of the vet's voice and smiled faintly. "So he stays," the boy said. "Yes," the vet replied. "He stays." The days that followed were quiet ones, no visitors, no debates, just routine and patience. The horse slept more than he ever had, deep and heavy, like a body finally allowed to rest. His breathing slowly smoothed out, the cough faded into memory. Food returned to his interest, then to his appetite. The boy stayed close, always listening. He learned the sound of healthy sleep, the rhythm of comfort. He could tell when the horse dreamed of running and when he dreamed of nothing at all. Both were good signs. The man returned to work in small pieces, fitting the world around the care that mattered most. Money stayed tight, but help came in ways he did not expect. Feed left quietly by the barn door. A note slipped into his hand in town. People who had doubted before now nodded with respect. Time did what time does best. It worked slowly, without noise. Weeks passed, then months. The horse grew stronger, not fast, but steady. His coat filled in, his eyes brightened. The injured leg still carried a reminder of the past, but it no longer ruled his movement. He learned new ways to balance, new rhythms that suited his body now. The boy walked him every day, sometimes just a few steps, sometimes farther. They learned each other completely. The horse trusted the boy's voice more than any signal. The boy trusted the horse's breath to guide him. One afternoon, without warning, the horse stepped ahead on his own. Just one step, then another. The boy stopped, surprised, then laughed. The sound rang through the pasture like a bell. "You are leading me now," the boy said. The man watched from the fence, eyes shining. He knew then that the question he had feared most no longer mattered. The horse did not need to be strong by old standards. He only needed to be alive, and he was. The local gathering came again the following year. This time, no one invited them. They simply came. The horse walked calmly off the trailer. The boy walked beside him, confident and relaxed. There were whispers again, but different ones. People noticed how the horse moved with purpose, how he responded to the boy's smallest cue. They did not perform. They did not need to. They stood together in the open, letting the moment speak for itself. Children came close. Hands reached out. The horse accepted the attention with quiet dignity. Someone asked the man if the horse was for sale. He smiled and shook his head. "Some things are not bought twice," he said. As seasons turned, the horse found his place. He never worked fields or pulled loads. Instead, he became something else. A steady presence, a teacher of patience. People brought their children, especially those who struggled in ways not always seen. The horse stood for them, calm and understanding, as if he knew what it meant to be overlooked. The boy grew too. His confidence carried into other parts of life. He learned that strength came in many forms, that listening could change outcomes, that choosing compassion, even when it made no sense to others, could shape a future. The man often thought back to the auction barn, to the thin horse no one wanted. He realized then that rejection had not been the end of the horse's story. It had been the beginning. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the land in gold, the boy sat beside the horse in the pasture. He leaned against the horse's shoulder, listening to the steady heartbeat beneath. "We saved each other," the boy said. The horse breathed out, warm and slow, as if agreeing. The man watched them from a distance, understanding now what he had not before. That life does not always reward strength or speed. Sometimes it rewards those who stay, who listen, who see value where others turn away. The weak horse rejected at auction had become a symbol of quiet resilience. The blind boy who bought him had shown that sight is not always about eyes. Together, they proved that hope does not shout. It waits patiently for someone willing to hear it. As night settled in, the horse lifted his head and looked out across the land. He stood steady, grounded, alive. The boy rested beside him, content. The man closed the gate softly, knowing this chapter had found its ending, not in perfection, but in purpose. And that was more than enough.